Our listeners have been asking again and again, week in, week out, about the J&J one-shot vaccine and how could that be as good as the two-shot AstraZeneca or two-shot Moderna or Pfizer, and how come they can get their COVID cert, which, by the way, I still haven't got, how they can get their COVID cert after only one jab, and they're wondering, am I safe to be in their company? So what's the story?
Well, it's good, but actually, I mean, it's good to ask that question because it is a single shot, and you're wondering, how can people you say get away with one shot and not two? And there are some studies in America mainly suggesting it wasn't as good necessarily as, say, Pfizer or Moderna or AstraZeneca. But now a big study from South Africa, 477,236 people were looked at, which is a huge number. They'd all been vaccinated with the Janssen vaccine. And it's good. There was over 90% protection against death, which of course, and severe illness, which is the key thing. And then there was 67% protection against infection with beta, which is the old South African one, and 71% protection from infection with delta. So it's really performing as we'd hope. And the trials, of course, had suggested it should be around that number. But the main thing is that it's over 90% protection against severe disease, hospitalisation and death. So it's a really good result for that vaccine.
Okay, so they deserve their COVID cert with the green tick. Because it's just as good in terms of all the rest of it. I mean, how does that compare, by the way, to the infection rates for Pfizer and for AstraZeneca on Delta? I mean, we know that the results of limited deaths are great for both those. Do they compare equally then?
They do. It's even slightly better maybe overall. Now, what's happening is, as we know, Pat, the Delta is breaking through in vaccinated people, but only in their noses. I mean, that's what all the evidence suggests. You can pick it up in your nose if you're vaccinated because the immune system isn't quite as active in your nose, but it stops, your lungs are protected, if you know what I mean. So in other words, you might see a rate of infection post-vaccination, but then again, it's not developing into severe disease. And Delta gave 71% against even in your nose, you know, so it's a good percent. I mean, they're all pretty equivalent, really. It's settling out around 60% on average protection against infection, you know, with Delta, but that means 40% will get infected. But as I've just said, it won't progress into severe disease.
Yeah. What do you make of the current high numbers? I mean, over 1,800 yesterday, numbers in hospital creeping up very slowly, but nonetheless creeping up.
Yeah, we've got to keep an eye on it. Yeah, I mean, it is rising slightly, and it is a bit predictable. Delta is much more transmissible, so we saw this coming in a sense. But again, the key metric is severe disease and death, and that seems to be holding firm. You know, and of course, as you know, Pat, the main people who are ending up really sick are unvaccinated, and that's holding true across the world now. So in the US, for example, I reckon 80% of all deaths and severe illnesses are in the unvaccinated. You know, so in other words, there will be some people getting infected who are vaccinated, but it's a minority. You know, and the advice remains the vaccine is your best protection as ever.
Now, one of the worrying things is a decline in measles and polio vaccination in the developing world.
Yeah, this is unusual. I mean, I came across this a few days ago, and it's a slight concern, it must be said. They've noticed that in poorer countries, the uptake of measles and polio vaccines has plummeted. And in fact, it's the lowest since 2009. And there's 23 million people, children, have missed these basic vaccines now. 3.5 million in India are now unvaccinated against these two diseases. And it's a concern because these are much more serious than COVID. As we know, in children, measles and polio can be extremely severe diseases. And now there's a concern that basically kids aren't getting vaccinated with the normal vaccines. The main reason for that seems to be the health system is overwhelmed. Of course, with COVID, you see in these countries. And they're stretched, and the healthcare systems weren't ideal in some of these countries either, you know. And now one knock-on effect is they can't get these regular vaccines out to children. And of course, they're not vaccinated against COVID either. So UNICEF have really flagged this up as a concern because these are extremely, as we know, severe diseases in children, much more severe than COVID. So it's a concern.
Yeah, and it is a global world, so people are coming and going with families in and out of countries where there might suddenly be measles or polio epidemics. Do we still vaccinate against polio here, or have we considered
No,
it
I don't think we do. Yeah, we have stopped because it's almost eradicated, remember. I mean, polio is nearly gone. I mean, the good news of polio is, as you may have seen, it's almost gone from Africa anyway. It's still in India, but they're trying to get rid of it. Now, of course, the risk is it'll sort of creep back up again, and of course, we wouldn't want polio, a big epidemic of polio, would we? Because as you've just said, we are unvaccinated against that particular virus.